The chapel smells of lilies and something else I cannot quite name, perhaps grief itself, trapped in the air like humidity before a storm. I stand beside my mother's casket, my hand resting on the polished mahogany, feeling the cool wood beneath my palm. Patricia Harrison, the nameplate reads, beloved wife and mother, 58 years old. Too young, everyone keeps saying, as if repeating it might somehow change the finality of her death. My stepfather Robert stands on the opposite side, his face a mask I have learned to read over the past 23 years. He wears his grief like a tailored suit, perfectly fitted, appropriately somber, yet somehow not quite reaching his eyes. His hands grip the edge of the casket, knuckles white against his tan skin, and I wonder if he truly mourns her, or merely performs the role expected of him. The funeral home fills with faces from my mother's life. Her book club friends cluster near the entrance, dabbing tissues to their eyes. Her younger sister Margaret sits in the front row, openly weeping. My half-brother Daniel, Robert's son from his first marriage, stands against the back wall, checking his phone every few minutes. He flew in from Seattle this morning, arriving just before the service began. We exchange a brief nod, the extent of our sibling relationship summarized in that single gesture. I smooth my black dress for the 100th time, a nervous habit I have carried since childhood. The fabric feels foreign against my skin, too formal, too final. 3 days ago, I was sitting in my office at the marketing firm, reviewing campaign proposals for a new client. Then my phone rang. Robert's voice, carefully controlled, delivered the news that shattered my ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Your mother had a stroke. She did not make it. The words sounded rehearsed, like lines from a play he had practiced. Now, staring at her peaceful face in the casket, makeup applied to mask death's pale touch, I cannot reconcile this still form with the vibrant woman who called me just last Thursday. We talked about everything and nothing, our usual weekly conversation. She mentioned wanting to redecorate the guest room, asked about my new job, wondered when I might settle down and give her grandchildren. I laughed, deflecting as always, promising to visit soon. Soon became never, and that ordinary conversation became our last. The minister begins the service, his voice a practiced blend of comfort and solemnity. He speaks of my mother's kindness, her dedication to the community literacy program, her love of gardening. Generic truths that somehow miss the essence of who she actually was. He does not mention her sharp wit, the way she could silence a room with a single raised eyebrow, or how she hummed while cooking, always slightly off-key. I tune out his words, instead studying the faces around me. Aunt Margaret dabs her eyes continuously, her grief raw and unfiltered. My mother's best friend Sandra sits beside her, one hand on Margaret's shoulder, offering silent support. These are the people who knew my mother, who shared pieces of her life I never accessed. How well did I truly know her? The question surfaces unbidden, uncomfortable. Robert clears his throat beside the casket, drawing everyone's attention. The minister pauses mid-sentence, yielding the floor. My stepfather's face has changed, something harder settling into his features. My stomach clenches with inexplicable dread. Before we proceed, Robert says, his voice carrying across the chapel with unexpected strength, there is something everyone needs to know, something Patricia kept hidden for 32 years. The room falls silent. Even Aunt Margaret's crying stops, her tissue frozen halfway to her face. I feel the weight of every gaze shifting between Robert and me, though I cannot fathom why. Emily, Robert says, turning to face me directly, is not Patricia's biological daughter. The words land like stones in still water, creating ripples that spread outward in every direction. I hear gasps, whispers erupting like small fires throughout the chapel. My mind struggles to process what he just said, rejecting the statement as absurd, impossible. What are you talking about? My voice sounds foreign to my own ears, high-pitched and trembling. Of course I am. This is insane. Robert's expression remains fixed, determined. Patricia could not have children. We underwent fertility treatments for years after we married, but nothing worked. She was devastated. Then suddenly, mysteriously, she became pregnant with you. He pauses, letting his words sink in. But I know the truth. I have always known. Aunt Margaret stands abruptly, her face flushed with anger. Robert Mitchell, how dare you? Patricia loved Emily more than life itself. This is a funeral, not a circus. Sit down, Margaret, Robert says coldly. You know as well as I do that your sister was incapable of carrying a child. The medical records prove it. My legs threaten to buckle. I grip the casket edge, mirroring Robert's earlier posture, needing something solid to anchor me to reality. Medical records? Infertility? None of this makes sense. My mother never mentioned any fertility issues. I existed. I stood here, breathing, living proof that whatever Robert claimed was wrong. This is ridiculous, I managed to say, though my voice lacks conviction. Mom never said anything about fertility problems. Because she was hiding the truth. Robert continues, his voice gaining momentum like a boulder rolling downhill. She adopted you or took you from someone else. I never knew the full story because she refused to discuss it, but I know you are not her biological child, which means you have no legal claim to her estate. Ah, there it is. The real reason for this public spectacle. The estate. My mother died without updating her will after she and Robert separated 8 months ago. They were not divorced, merely living apart while working through their issues. Or, so I believed. Under current legal terms, I inherited everything. The house in Richmond, the investment portfolio, the savings accounts my mother had carefully built over decades. Robert, as her estranged spouse, received nothing. The chapel erupts in voices, everyone talking at once. Aunt Margaret is shouting at Robert, calling him despicable. Sandra tries to calm her. Daniel has put away his phone, suddenly interested in the proceedings. Other mourners exchange shocked glances, leaning toward their neighbors to share opinions. I stand frozen, my mother's body between us, like a silent witness to this destruction. She always protected me from Robert's coldness, his calculated nature. Even in death, she lies between us, though now she cannot intervene. The chapel doors open with a soft creak. A man in a gray suit enters, carrying a leather briefcase. He walks with purpose down the center aisle, ignoring the chaos around him. I recognize him immediately. Jonathan Carter, my mother's attorney. She hired him shortly after separating from Robert, though she never explained why she needed legal counsel beyond the separation. Jonathan reaches the front of the chapel and sets his briefcase on the first pew. The room gradually quiets as people realize something significant is happening. He removes his glasses, cleaning them with methodical precision before addressing the assembly. Mr. Mitchell, Jonathan says, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to courtrooms. I represent Patricia Harrison's estate. Your allegations regarding Emily Harrison's parentage are both inflammatory and, frankly, poorly timed. Robert's jaw tightens. I have every right to contest her inheritance. She is not Patricia's biological daughter. Actually, Jonathan replies, opening his briefcase and extracting a thick manila folder. You have no standing whatsoever in this matter. Patricia and you were legally separated at the time of her death. Your marital property settlement was already in progress. You signed away any claims to her separate property, which includes all assets acquired before your marriage and her inheritance from her parents. I watch this exchange as though watching a film, detached from my own participation. Jonathan's presence both comforts and confuses me. How does he know about Robert's claim? Did my mother anticipate this attack? That is irrelevant, Robert insists, his composure cracking slightly. If Emily is not her biological daughter, then the will is invalid. Patricia's assets should revert to her blood relatives. He gestures toward Aunt Margaret. Her sister, for instance. Margaret's face twists with disgust. I do not want your blood money, Robert. Emily is Patricia's daughter in every way that matters. Jonathan holds up a hand, silencing the brewing argument. We can settle this quite easily. He reaches into his briefcase again, producing 2 documents. I have here 2 items of interest. First, a DNA test conducted 6 months ago, comparing Emily's DNA to Patricia's. My breath catches. 6 months ago? My mother had us tested? Why? What did she know? Second, Jonathan continues, an audio recording Patricia made shortly before her death. She asked me to play it at this precise moment, should Mr. Mitchell make the accusations he has made today. He pauses, looking directly at Robert. She knew you would do this. She predicted your behavior with remarkable accuracy. Robert's face drains of color. For the first time since his bombshell announcement, he appears uncertain, even afraid. What could my mother possibly have recorded that would produce such a reaction? The DNA test, Jonathan says, holding up the document, confirms that Emily Harrison is indeed Patricia Harrison's biological daughter. The test was conducted at an independent laboratory, witnessed and notarized to prevent any claims of tampering. Relief floods through me, so powerful I nearly collapse. I am her daughter. Of course I am. The alternative was too horrible to contemplate, not because of inheritance or legal issues, but because it would mean my entire life was built on lies. Yet even as relief washes over me, questions surface. Why did my mother feel compelled to conduct a DNA test? What did she know that prompted such action? And what exactly is on that recording? However, Jonathan continues, his tone shifting, there is more to this story. Patricia specifically requested that I play her recording before revealing certain details about Emily's parentage. She wanted everyone, especially Mr. Mitchell, to hear the full truth. He produces a small digital recorder from his briefcase, placing it on top of the casket. The gesture seems almost sacrilegious, using my mother's body as a stage for this revelation, yet somehow fitting. She orchestrated this moment, planned it, with the same meticulous attention she applied to everything in her life. Jonathan presses play. Static fills the chapel for a moment, then my mother's voice emerges, clear and strong despite her illness. I close my eyes, letting the sound wash over me. I will never hear this voice again, except in recordings, never receive another phone call, never hear her laugh or scold or offer unsolicited advice. If you are hearing this, my mother begins, her voice steady, then I have passed away, and Robert has done exactly what I predicted he would do. He has publicly challenged Emily's legitimacy at my funeral. She pauses, and I hear her take a deep breath. Robert, you are a predictable, small-minded man. I wasted 23 years of my life married to you, and I will not let you waste one more second of Emily's life with your lies and manipulations. I open my eyes, watching Robert's face. His skin has gone from pale to gray, his hands trembling slightly. Whatever my mother is about to reveal, he knows it, fears it. Emily is my biological daughter, my mother continues. The fertility issues Robert mentioned were his, not mine. He is sterile, completely incapable of fathering children. We discovered this after 2 years of trying to conceive. The doctors offered several options, including donor insemination. Robert refused. He said he would not raise another man's child, that if he could not be the biological father, we would remain childless. My eyes snap to Robert. He stares at the recorder as though it might explode, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. Around the chapel, I sense the shift in atmosphere. Sympathy for Robert evaporates, replaced by something harder, more judgmental. I could not accept that, my mother says, her voice strengthening. I wanted a child desperately, so I made a choice that I have never regretted, though I have carried its secret for 32 years. She pauses again. Longer this time. I had an affair. The chapel erupts again, but Jonathan raises his hand, demanding silence. My mother's voice continues, overriding the gasps and whispers. His name was Thomas Brennan. We met at a medical conference in Boston where I was presenting research on childhood literacy programs. He was a cardiac surgeon, brilliant, kind, everything Robert was not. We spent one weekend together, 3 days where I felt alive for the first time in years. I never told him about Robert's sterility, never told him I was hoping to conceive. When I returned home and discovered I was pregnant, I made a decision. My mind reels, trying to process this information. Thomas Brennan, my biological father, not Robert, never Robert, despite 32 years of him raising me, criticizing me, tolerating my presence in his life. I told Robert the pregnancy was a miracle, that somehow the fertility treatments had worked despite the doctor's prognosis. He knew I was lying. He knew it was impossible, but he went along with the fiction because divorce would have been embarrassing, would have damaged his reputation in the community. So we agreed on a silent bargain. I would never mention his sterility, and he would never question Emily's parentage. Robert slumps against the casket, his earlier bravado completely deflated. I should feel something for him, pity perhaps, but I can only feel relief that this man is not my father. For 32 years, my mother says, and I hear tears in her voice now, emotion breaking through. I watched Robert treat Emily with cold tolerance instead of love. I watched him favor Daniel, his son from his first marriage, while barely acknowledging Emily's accomplishments. I told myself it was worth it, that having Emily was worth any sacrifice, any lie. And it was. Emily, if you are hearing this, know that you were wanted, desperately wanted, loved beyond measure from the moment I knew you existed. Tears stream down my face now, hot and unstoppable. I feel Aunt Margaret's arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. My mother's voice continues, strong again, purposeful. Thomas Brennan died 3 years ago in a car accident. I learned of his death through a mutual colleague. He never knew about Emily, never knew that our brief time together created this beautiful, strong, brilliant daughter. Part of me regrets that he never knew her, never saw what an extraordinary person she became. But another part of me is grateful he was spared Robert's resentment, spared the complexity that his presence would have created in Emily's life. Jonathan pauses the recording, looking at me with gentle concern. Do you need a moment? I shake my head, wiping tears with the back of my hand. No, play the rest. He nods and presses play. My mother's voice fills the chapel again, softer now, more intimate, as though she speaks directly to me despite the crowd surrounding us. Emily, I know this revelation will shock you. I am sorry for keeping this secret, sorry you had to learn about your biological father this way. But I want you to understand why I made the choices I made. I wanted you. I wanted you with every fiber of my being. Robert's sterility did not change that desire. It only changed how I fulfilled it. She pauses, and I hear papers rustling in the background of the recording. Jonathan has all the documentation you will need. Medical records proving Robert's sterility, letters from Thomas's colleagues confirming our relationship, even a few photographs from that conference, evidence that I existed in his life, however briefly. Another pause, longer this time. When she speaks again, her voice carries a different quality, harder, more determined. Robert, I know you are listening. I know you are probably standing there, trying to figure out how to salvage your claim to my estate. Let me save you the trouble. You have no claim. None whatsoever. I made sure of that. Every asset I possess, every penny I saved, every property I own, it all goes to Emily. You will receive nothing. You do not deserve anything from me, not after the years of emotional distance, not after treating our daughter like an unwelcome guest in her own home." Robert straightened slightly, color returning to his face, but it is the red of anger now, not the gray of fear. His eyes burn with rage as he stares at the recorder. "You thought you could challenge Emily's inheritance by claiming she was not my biological child," my mother continues, and I hear satisfaction in her voice. "You thought the fertility issues would be enough to cast doubt, to open legal challenges that would drag through courts for years, draining the estate with legal fees. But I anticipated you, Robert. I have always been smarter than you gave me credit for." The recording continues, with my mother's voice taking on a lecturing tone, as though she is explaining something to a particularly slow student. "The DNA test proves Emily is my biological daughter. The medical records prove you are sterile. Simple mathematics, Robert. If I am Emily's mother and you are sterile, then someone else must be her father. That someone was Thomas Brennan, and before you even think of claiming parental rights or challenging the will on grounds of adultery, let me remind you of several facts." I watch Robert's face as my mother lists these facts with methodical precision. She must have worked on this recording for weeks, considering every angle, closing every loophole he might exploit. "First, you knew about your sterility before Emily was conceived. You knew our marriage was over in any meaningful sense. Second, you accepted my pregnancy without question, allowing everyone to believe you were Emily's father. You signed her birth certificate. You raised her, poorly, as your daughter. Third, and most importantly, you committed the same infidelity you now might try to use against me." This revelation produces gasps throughout the chapel. Even Daniel looks up from his phone, interest finally captured. Robert's face goes from red to purple, fury and panic warring for dominance. "Yes, Robert," my mother says, and I hear grim satisfaction in her voice. "I know about Veronica. I have known for 5 years. The affair you thought you hid so cleverly, meeting her at that hotel in Charlottesville twice a month. I have credit card receipts, photographs, even a recording from a private investigator I hired. So if you are considering challenging my will on grounds of adultery, remember that sword cuts both ways." The chapel has fallen completely silent now. Even those who were whispering have stopped, everyone riveted by this posthumous confrontation between my mother and her estranged husband. "Jonathan has all this documentation," my mother continues. "If you contest the will, if you attempt to claim Emily is not entitled to inherit because of the circumstances of her conception, we will countersue. We will make your affair public record. We will detail every hotel stay, every gift you bought Veronica with our marital funds, every lie you told. Your reputation in Richmond will be destroyed. Your business contacts, your golf club membership, your standing in the community, all of it gone." Robert sways slightly, gripping the casket edge for support. The fight has drained from his face, replaced by resignation. He knows she has won, even from beyond the grave. My mother, ever the strategist, planned her final chess moves with devastating precision. "So here is my offer, Robert," my mother says, her voice softening slightly. "Walk away. Accept that Emily inherits everything. Do not contest the will. Do not make accusations. Do not create problems. In return, I will spare you public humiliation. The evidence of your affair remains sealed. Your reputation stays intact. You lose access to my estate, but you keep your dignity." The recording falls silent for a moment. Then my mother speaks again, her voice directed at me now. "Emily, sweetheart, I am so sorry you had to learn all this at my funeral. I wanted to tell you so many times over the years, but the timing never seemed right. and then it became easier to maintain the silence. Thomas Brennan was a good man. You would have liked him, and I think he would have been so proud of you. Tears blur my vision again. I never knew my real father. Never even suspected Robert was not biologically mine, despite his emotional distance. The revelation should feel devastating. Yet instead, I feel oddly relieved. His coldness was not my fault, not a reflection of my worth, but a product of his own issues, his own wounded pride. Jonathan will give you a packet of information about Thomas. My mother continues. Photographs, biographical details, letters he wrote to me during those 3 days. I kept everything, treasured it, secretly all these years. He died not knowing about you, but I believe he would have loved you, Emily. How could he not? You are the best thing I ever did, the best choice I ever made. The recording continues with my mother providing specific instructions about her will, listing account numbers and property deeds, all the administrative details that follow death. But I barely hear these parts, my mind still processing everything that came before. Finally, my mother's voice softens one last time. I love you, Emily. I have loved you from the moment I knew you existed. Nothing in this recording changes that. You are my daughter, chosen and cherished, and I am so proud of the woman you have become. Live fully, love deeply, and do not let Robert's bitterness poison your future. You deserve happiness, and I hope you find it. The recording ends with a soft click. Jonathan turns off the device and carefully places it back in his briefcase. The chapel remains silent, everyone processing what they just heard. I feel exposed, my family's deepest secrets laid bare before dozens of witnesses. Yet somehow, I also feel liberated. The truth, however complicated, is better than living in Robert's shadow of lies and manipulations. Aunt Margaret squeezes my shoulder. Your mother was a warrior, she whispers. She protected you even in death. I nod, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. My mother planned all this, anticipated Robert's cruelty, and preempted it with surgical precision. She knew him better than he knew himself, understood exactly how he would react, and prepared accordingly. Robert still stands across the casket from me, but he seems smaller now, diminished. His grand gesture, his public accusation, meant to disinherit me, has backfired spectacularly. Everyone in this chapel now knows his sterility, his affair, his manipulation. Whatever sympathy people might have offered a grieving widower has evaporated, replaced by contempt for his attempted theft from his own stepdaughter. Jonathan addresses the chapel, his voice calm and professional. Out of respect for Patricia's memory and for this gathering, I suggest we postpone further discussion of these matters until after the service concludes. Emily, if you would like to proceed with the funeral, we can address legal details later. I glance at my mother's face in the casket, serene despite the chaos around her. She would want me to finish this properly, to give her a dignified farewell, despite Robert's interruption. I nod to Jonathan, then to the minister, who has been standing awkwardly to the side throughout this entire confrontation. The minister clears his throat, attempting to regain control of the service. Perhaps we should continue with the eulogy. Emily, would you like to say a few words about your mother? I step forward, my legs steadier now, despite everything. I look at the faces gathered in the chapel, seeing shock, sympathy, curiosity. These people came to mourn my mother, not to witness a family implosion, yet here they are, captive audience to our private dysfunction made public. My mother, I begin, my voice scratchy but growing stronger, was the most organized person I ever knew. She labeled everything, planned everything, anticipated problems before they occurred. I allow myself a small smile. Apparently that extended to her own funeral. A few nervous laughs ripple through the gathering. Even Aunt Margaret manages a watery smile. She taught me that love is a choice, an action, not just a feeling. She chose me when I was nothing more than a possibility, a hope. She chose to protect me my entire life, even from truths she thought might hurt me. I glance at Robert, who refuses to meet my eyes. She chose to love me unconditionally, which is the greatest gift a parent can give. I pause, gathering my thoughts. The eulogy I had prepared 3 days ago seems inadequate now, too generic, missing the complexity of who my mother actually was. Patricia Harrison was not perfect. She kept secrets, made difficult choices, lived with consequences most people never face. But everything she did, every choice she made, came from love. She loved me enough to fight for my existence, to endure a loveless marriage rather than give me up, to plan her estate with meticulous detail so I would be protected even after her death. Aunt Margaret is crying openly now, nodding her agreement. Sandra hands her another tissue. Even a few of the book club ladies dab their eyes, moved by the complicated portrait of their friend emerging from this day's revelations. I did not know Thomas Brennan, my biological father, but I believe he was a good man because my mother chose him. She had excellent judgment in everything except her first marriage. This produces more laughter, stronger now, the tension in the room easing slightly. I hope to learn more about him, to understand the man whose genes I carry, but I already know the most important thing. He and my mother created something beautiful together, however briefly. They created me. I reach out and touch my mother's hand, cold and still beneath mine. Thank you, Mom, for every sacrifice, every choice, every moment of love. Thank you for being brave enough to want me, smart enough to protect me, and strategic enough to anticipate even this moment. I love you, and I will honor your memory by living the life you fought so hard to give me. The minister concludes the service with a final prayer. As people begin to stand, preparing to file past the casket for a final viewing, Jonathan approaches me quietly. Emily, we should speak privately before the burial. There are additional documents your mother wanted you to have, items she specifically requested I give you after the recording was played. I nod, following him to a small room off the main chapel. Aunt Margaret accompanies us, refusing to leave my side. Jonathan closes the door, shutting out the murmur of voices from the chapel. He opens his briefcase and removes a large envelope, unsealed, with my name written in my mother's handwriting. She prepared this 6 months ago, shortly after the separation from Robert became official. She updated it 3 weeks before her death, adding the audio recording and additional documentation. I take the envelope, feeling its weight. My hands tremble slightly as I open it and remove the contents. Photographs spill onto the table, showing a younger version of my mother standing beside a tall man with dark hair and warm eyes, Thomas Brennan, my father. She wanted you to have these, Jonathan says gently. There are also letters he wrote to her during those 3 days they spent together. She kept everything. I pick up one photograph, studying Thomas's face. Do I look like him? I have my mother's nose, her sharp chin, but perhaps his eyes, his height. It is impossible to say, looking at a stranger who is somehow intimately connected to my existence. There is more, Jonathan continues, extracting another document. Your mother established a trust for you years ago, long before the separation. She moved most of her assets into it gradually over time, protecting them from marital property claims. Even if she and Robert had reconciled, he would never have had access to these funds. Aunt Margaret laughs, a sound somewhere between admiration and disbelief. Patricia planned everything, did not she? Even 20 years ago, she was protecting Emily. She was extremely thorough. Jonathan agrees. The house in Richmond is in the trust, the investment portfolio, the savings accounts, even her retirement funds. Robert has no claim to any of it, regardless of their marital status at the time of her death. I sink into a chair, overwhelmed by the implications. My mother spent decades protecting me from Robert, shielding assets, gathering evidence, preparing for a confrontation she knew would come eventually. Every choice she made, from conceiving me with Thomas Brennan to meticulously documenting Robert's affair, was part of this larger strategy. Why did she stay with him? I ask, the question bursting out before I can stop it. If she knew what he was, why did she waste 23 years married to him? Jonathan and Aunt Margaret exchange glances. Finally, my aunt speaks, her voice gentle. She stayed for you, Emily. In her mind, a stable two-parent household, even a cold one, was better than divorce and custody battles. Robert would have fought for custody out of spite, not love, and your mother could not risk losing you. The explanation settles over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its devotion. My mother sacrificed her happiness for mine, enduring Robert's coldness, so I would have stability. The weight of that sacrifice presses down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. She did not tell you this to make you feel guilty, Jonathan says, reading my expression accurately. She told you this so you would understand why she made the choices she made. She wanted you to know she chose you, always, in every decision. I nod, blinking back fresh tears. The envelope contains more items. A flash drive labeled Thomas's Music in my mother's handwriting, a small leather journal with dates spanning from 32 years ago to just a few months before her death, several legal documents proving Robert's sterility and his affair. The journal, Aunt Margaret says softly, is Patricia's record of everything, every moment she spent with Thomas, every stage of your childhood, every instance of Robert's cruelty she witnessed and documented. She wrote it all down, just in case of this exact moment I realize, just in case Robert tried to contest my inheritance or claim I was not her daughter. My mother built a fortress of evidence around me, protecting me even from beyond the grave. A knock interrupts our private meeting. The door opens slightly, and the funeral director peeks in. I apologize for the intrusion, but we need to proceed with the burial shortly. The cemetery is expecting us. Jonathan nods, then turns to me. Emily, there is one more thing. Your mother left specific instructions for the burial. She wants to be interred wearing a particular necklace, one she kept in her safety deposit box. I retrieved it yesterday. He produces a small velvet box and opens it. Inside lies a delicate gold chain with a locket. I recognize it instantly as the one my mother wore in the photographs with Thomas Brennan. She wants you to place it on her, Jonathan says. She called it her most precious possession after you. I take the box, cradling it carefully. The locket feels warm despite sitting in a briefcase for days. I open it and see two tiny photographs, one of Thomas Brennan, the other a baby picture of me at perhaps 6 months old. She carried you both close to her heart, Aunt Margaret whispers, always. We return to the chapel, where people mill about awkwardly, unsure whether to leave or wait. Robert has disappeared, likely unable to face the judgment of neighbors and acquaintances who witnessed his public humiliation. Daniel stands near the door, looking uncertain. I make eye contact with him, and he approaches hesitantly. Emily, I had no idea, he says, his voice low. Dad never told me any of this. If I had known what he was planning. It is not your fault, I tell him, meaning it. Daniel is not responsible for his father's actions. We were never close, separated by Robert's favoritism and my mother's protective distance, but he does not deserve my anger. Patricia was good to me, Daniel continues, better than my own mother sometimes. I am sorry for your loss. and I am sorry my father is such an ass." His blunt assessment startles a laugh from me, breaking the tension. "Thank you, Daniel. That means more than you know." The funeral director guides us back to the casket for the final viewing before transporting my mother to the cemetery. I approach with the locket, opening the casket one last time. My mother's hands are folded across her chest. Peaceful, unburdened, I gently lift her head, fastening the necklace around her neck, arranging the locket so it rests just below her collar. "You can be with him now," I whisper. "No more secrets, no more lies, just love." As I step back, I notice Aunt Margaret has joined me, her hand finding mine and squeezing tight. "She is free now," my aunt says. "Free from Robert, free from the burden of those secrets. She can finally rest." The funeral director closes the casket with quiet finality, and I watch as they wheel my mother out of the chapel into the hearse waiting outside. The afternoon sun breaks through clouds that have threatened rain all day, casting golden light across the parking lot. At the cemetery, a smaller group gathers around the gravesite. Robert has not appeared, which relieves me more than I want to admit. The minister says another brief prayer, and then they lower my mother into the ground beside her parents, reunited with family who died years before. Each person drops a flower onto the casket as they file past. When my turn comes, I drop a white rose, my mother's favorite, and whisper my final goodbye. "Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for every sacrifice. I will make you proud." Aunt Margaret drops a rose next, then Sandra, then various friends and colleagues. The book club ladies all drop roses together, a united farewell to their friend. Within minutes, the casket disappears beneath a blanket of flowers, love made visible and tangible. As people begin to disperse, heading back to their cars, Jonathan approaches me one final time. "Emily, whenever you are ready, come to my office. We will go through everything in detail. Make sure you understand all the accounts and properties. Your mother left very specific instructions for managing the estate. Thank you," I say, "for everything you did for her, for helping her protect me." "It was my honor," Jonathan replies. "Patricia was an exceptional woman, and she loved you fiercely. Never doubt that." After he leaves, I remain at the gravesite, watching as cemetery workers begin filling in the hole with dirt. Each shovelful feels like a door closing, separating me permanently from my mother's physical presence. Yet, her voice from that recording echoes in my mind, strong and certain, still protecting me, still loving me. Aunt Margaret puts her arm around my shoulders. "Come back to my house. Sandra is organizing food, and people will want to pay their respects properly, away from all that chaos at the funeral." I nod, allowing her to guide me toward the parking lot. As we walk past rows of headstones, I think about the life my mother built on secrets and sacrifices. She created me from an affair, raised me in a cold marriage, planned for decades to protect me from her husband's greed. Every choice she made was calculated, strategic, yet rooted in love so deep it transcended conventional morality. I am not sure how I feel about all the revelations from today. Relief that Robert is not my biological father. Grief for the father I never knew. Gratitude for my mother's protection, mixed with sadness at the cost of that protection. The emotions tangle together, too complex to separate cleanly. At Aunt Margaret's house, people have indeed gathered, bringing casseroles and desserts, offering condolences and support. But they also want to discuss what happened at the funeral, the dramatic revelations, Robert's humiliation. I overhear whispered conversations, see curious glances directed my way. Sandra intercepts me at the door, pulling me into the kitchen, away from the crowd. "How are you holding up?" "I honestly do not know," I admit. "This morning, I woke up preparing to bury my mother. Now, I am trying to process that my entire life story has changed. My father is not my father. My mother had an affair. Robert is sterile and unfaithful. It is too much. Sandra nods sympathetically. Patricia asked me to tell you something if this day ever came. She made me promise years ago. What? She said to tell you that biological facts matter less than lived experience. Thomas Brennan gave you genes, but Patricia gave you life. Love. Everything that matters. Do not waste energy mourning a father you never knew when you had a mother who loved you more than anything. The words unlock something inside me, permission to grieve what I lost rather than what I never had. I cry then, really cry, releasing the tension and shock and overwhelming sadness of this impossible day. Sandra holds me while I sob, not offering platitudes or solutions, just presence. Eventually the tears subside, leaving me exhausted but calmer. I wash my face in Margaret's bathroom, studying my reflection in the mirror. Do I look different, knowing my true parentage? The same face stares back at me, unchanged by knowledge. I am still Emily Harrison, still 32 years old, still a marketing professional with a condo in Richmond and a complicated family history. But I am also Thomas Brennan's daughter, inheritor of his genes, if not his presence. I am the product of a brief affair that meant everything to my mother and nothing to him, because he never knew. I am the result of choices made by people long before I drew my first breath. Choices that shaped every aspect of my existence. The gathering at Aunt Margaret's house continues for hours. People eat, share stories about my mother, carefully avoid mentioning Robert. I participate minimally, still processing, still trying to integrate this new understanding of my history. As evening approaches, guests begin to depart. I help Margaret clean up, stacking plates and wrapping leftovers, grateful for simple tasks that require no emotional energy. Sandra stays to help, the three of us working in companionable silence. What will you do about Robert? Margaret asks, as we finish washing dishes. Nothing, I reply. What can I do? Mom already handled everything. He has no claim to the estate, no legal standing to challenge me. His affair will stay private as long as he stays away. It is over. He will not like being beaten, Sandra observes, especially beaten by Patricia from beyond the grave. He does not have to like it, Margaret says firmly. He just has to accept it. Patricia outmaneuvered him completely. He is checkmate. I smile at that image. My mother as chess master, moving pieces years in advance, anticipating every counter move, protecting her most important piece at all costs. Me. Later, alone in my condo, I open the envelope Jonathan gave me and begin reading Thomas Brennan's letters to my mother. His handwriting is bold, confident, filled with humor and intelligence. He writes about medicine, about music he loves, about a weekend in Boston that changed him in ways he does not quite understand. In the final letter, dated the Sunday before my mother returned to Richmond, he writes, Patricia, these 3 days with you have been extraordinary. I do not know what happens next, where life takes us, but I want you to know that you are remarkable, brilliant and beautiful, and everything I did not know I was looking for. If circumstances were different, if we lived in the same city, if timing aligned, I think we could build something wonderful together. But I understand reality. You have a life in Richmond, commitments I cannot ask you to abandon, so I will treasure these days, hold them close, and remember that for one brief moment, I was lucky enough to know you. He never knew, I realize, reading the letter again. He never knew that those 3 days produced me, that his brief connection with my mother created a life that would span decades. He thought their time together was finite, complete, a beautiful memory with no lasting consequences. He died, never knowing his legacy continued in me. I pick up the photograph of him, studying his face more carefully. Now I see the resemblance, the shape of my eyes, the angle of my jaw, the way my hair falls when I do not style it, small echoes of his features reflected in mine. I am his daughter, genetically, biologically, though we never met and never will. The flash drive contains music, as my mother's label indicated. I plug it into my laptop and find hundreds of songs, everything from classical to jazz to rock, Thomas's music collection preserved and passed down to me. I play a random selection, a Miles Davis trumpet solo that fills my apartment with melancholy beauty. This is my inheritance from Thomas Brennan. Music and genetics, letters and photographs, fragments of a man I will never know, pieces of a puzzle I can never complete. My mother gave me everything else: life, love, security, protection. Between them, they made me who I am, though only one knew what they were creating. Over the following weeks, I meet with Jonathan multiple times, learning the full extent of my mother's estate. The house in Richmond, valued at nearly $600,000. Investment accounts totaling another $800,000. Retirement funds, life insurance policies, even a small vacation property in the mountains I never knew existed. Everything carefully protected in trusts and accounts Robert could never touch. Your mother was exceptionally smart about this, Jonathan tells me during one meeting. She started moving assets into protected accounts 20 years ago, long before anyone would suspect she was planning for divorce. Every bonus she received, every inheritance from her parents, she sheltered it away. She knew she would leave him eventually. I think she knew divorce was possible, even likely, given how unhappy the marriage was. She prepared for that eventuality while hoping it might not come to pass. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. Patricia loved you more than she loved her own comfort or happiness. Everything she did was to ensure you would be secure, regardless of what happened with Robert. I sign papers, transfer accounts into my name, update beneficiaries. The administrative details of death require surprising amounts of paperwork. Throughout the process, I feel my mother's presence in every carefully labeled document, every precisely organized folder. Even in death, she makes my life easier through her meticulous planning. Robert never contacts me, never attempts to contest the will despite his threats. The recording my mother left was apparently enough to silence him completely. I hear through Daniel that he has moved out of Richmond, relocating to North Carolina, where he has family and fewer reminders of his humiliation. Daniel and I develop an unexpected friendship through this process. He drives down from Seattle every few weeks, helping me sort through Robert's belongings that remain at my mother's house, supporting me through the emotional work of dismantling a household. Dad was not always terrible, Daniel tells me one afternoon as we pack books. When I was young before he married Patricia, he could be funny, affectionate even, but something changed after the marriage. He became bitter, resentful. I did not understand why until the funeral. His sterility, I say, understanding. He felt emasculated, inadequate. Then my mother got pregnant, proof she had been with someone else, and he could not even admit why it hurt because he had to maintain the fiction that I was his. 23 years of living that lie, Daniel agrees. No wonder he became such a jerk. Does not excuse his behavior, but maybe explains it. We continue packing in silence, preserving items worth keeping, marking others for donation. My mother's house will sell, adding to the estate. I cannot live here, cannot occupy this space where she endured so much unhappiness. But I will keep photographs, her journal, personal items that connect me to her memory. 6 months after the funeral, I receive an unexpected letter. The return address is from Boston, from a woman named Carolyn Brennan, Thomas's sister. I realize with a jolt, how did she find me? I open the envelope with trembling hands. Inside is a brief note written in neat cursive. Dear Emily, I recently learned of your existence through a mutual colleague who knew both your mother and my brother. I understand this must be overwhelming. Learning about Thomas so late, I would like to meet you, if you are willing, to share stories about your father and perhaps begin a relationship with your extended family. Thomas would have loved you, I am certain. He always wanted children, but never married. Knowing you exist, knowing part of him continues, would have made him so happy. Please consider meeting me. I have photographs and stories to share, pieces of your father's life that might help you understand where you come from. With hope, Carolyn Brennan. I read the letter 3 times, each time finding new layers of meaning. Thomas's sister wants to know me, wants to connect me to a family I never knew existed. The prospect terrifies and excites me in equal measure. Aunt Margaret, when I show her the letter, encourages me to respond. Patricia would want you to know Thomas's family, to understand that side of your heritage. She only kept secrets to protect you. Now that you know the truth, there is no reason to hide anymore. I compose a careful reply, agreeing to meet Carolyn in Boston next month. The prospect of learning about Thomas from someone who knew him, who loved him, feels both precious and terrifying. What if his family rejects me, an illegitimate child from a brief affair? What if they blame my mother for keeping his child secret? The meeting, when it finally happens, surprises me with its warmth. Carolyn greets me at a coffee shop near Boston Common, and I see Thomas in her features immediately. The same eyes, the same smile. She hugs me without hesitation, tears streaming down her face. You look just like him, she says, holding me at arm's length, studying my face. The shape of your face, your expressions, it is like seeing my brother again. We spend hours talking, Carolyn sharing stories about Thomas's childhood, his passion for medicine, his love of music. She shows me photographs spanning his entire life, filling in gaps my mother's few pictures could not address. He wanted children desperately, Carolyn tells me. He was engaged once, in his 30s, but she died in a car accident before they could marry. After that, he threw himself into his work, into saving other people's children. I think he had given up on having his own family. He never knew about me, I say, the regret heavy in my voice. My mother never told him. She had her reasons, I am sure, Carolyn says gently. From what you have told me about your stepfather, I understand why she kept the secret. But Emily, you should know. If Thomas had known about you, he would have moved mountains to be part of your life. He would have loved you fiercely. Meeting Carolyn opens a door to an entire branch of family I never knew existed. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all eager to welcome me. They do not judge my mother's choices or my illegitimate birth. They simply embrace me as Thomas's daughter, grateful to have this unexpected connection to a man they loved and lost. Over the following year, I split holidays between Aunt Margaret's house in Richmond and Carolyn's home in Boston, building relationships with both sides of my family. The Brennan family accepts me completely, incorporating me into traditions and celebrations as though I had always belonged. I learned that Thomas was a talented pianist, that he volunteered at free clinics on weekends, that he had a terrible sense of direction and got lost constantly. Small details that make him real, human, more than just a shadowy figure who contributed genetic material. Carolyn gives me Thomas's medical school ring, which he wore every day until his death. He would want you to have this, she says, pressing the heavy gold ring into my palm. You are his legacy, Emily, the daughter he never knew but would have cherished. My mother's house sells for above asking price, adding another influx of funds to the estate. I invest most of it conservatively, following advice from financial planners Jonathan recommends. The money feels abstract, numbers in accounts, disconnected from my daily life. But knowing it exists provides security I never had before. Freedom to make choices without financial desperation driving them. I changed jobs, leaving the marketing firm for a position at a nonprofit organization focused on childhood literacy, the same cause my mother championed through her work at the library. The pay is lower, but the work feels meaningful, connected to my mother's legacy. On the first anniversary of my mother's death, I returned to the cemetery with Aunt Margaret, Carolyn, and Sandra. We stand together at the grave, 4 women connected by love for Patricia Harrison, each holding pieces of her story. She would be proud of you, Margaret says, squeezing my hand, building a relationship with Thomas's family, honoring her values in your work. You are living the life she wanted for you. I kneel and place flowers on the grave, white roses from me, daisies from Margaret, lilies from Sandra, and purple irises from Carolyn, who never met my mother but honors her for giving Thomas a child. Thank you, Mom, I whisper to the headstone. Thank you for fighting for me, for every choice you made, for protecting me even now. I understand now what you sacrificed, what you endured. I will never take that for granted. As we walk back to the parking lot, I think about the funeral, about Robert's attempted betrayal and my mother's devastating response. She spent decades preparing for that moment, gathering evidence, closing loopholes, ensuring I would be protected regardless of what Robert tried. Some people might call her manipulative, calculating, but I call her a mother who loved her daughter enough to plan 20 years in advance, to endure an unhappy marriage, to carry secrets that weighed on her soul. Everything she did, every choice she made, served one purpose: protecting me. Robert disappeared from Richmond, from my life, defeated by a woman he underestimated. Daniel tells me his father remarried, to Veronica presumably, and lives quietly in Charlotte. The scandal of the funeral followed him, damaged his reputation beyond repair. He got exactly what my mother promised. He kept his dignity, but lost everything else. I do not forgive him for the coldness, for the years of making me feel unwanted in my own home. But I understand him better now, understand how his own wounds and inadequacies poisoned his capacity for love. He could not accept me because I was living proof of his sterility, his wife's betrayal, his own insufficient masculinity. That understanding does not excuse his behavior, but it allows me to release the anger I carried for so long. He is not worth my emotional energy, not worth the space he occupied in my head. My mother freed me from him, both legally and emotionally. I choose to honor that freedom by moving forward, building a life not defined by his rejection. 2 years after the funeral, I meet someone, Marcus, a teacher at the nonprofit who shares my passion for literacy and education. We take things slowly, both of us carrying baggage from previous relationships and complicated families. But there is something easy about being with him, something comfortable that makes me think maybe, eventually, this could become love. He knows my entire story, the affair, the secrets, the dramatic funeral revelation. I told him everything on our 3rd date, giving him the chance to run from my complicated history. Instead, he listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, then said, "Your mother sounds like she was an amazing woman. I wish I could have met her." That response, more than anything, showed me he might be someone worth building a future with. He sees my mother's actions as love, not manipulation. He understands complexity, refuses to reduce people to simple categories of good or bad. Carolyn approves of Marcus when she meets him at Thanksgiving. Thomas would have liked him, she declares, after spending an afternoon in conversation. He is smart, kind, and he treats you like you matter. That is all anyone could ask for. On the 3rd anniversary of my mother's death, I returned to the cemetery alone. I need this time with her, this private conversation without well-meaning family surrounding me. I met someone, I tell her headstone. His name is Marcus. I think you would like him. He is patient and kind. Everything Robert was not. I am not ready to marry him yet, but I am not afraid of the possibility either. You taught me that love is a choice, an action. I am learning to make that choice, to believe I deserve that kind of love. I sit on the grass beside her grave, leaning against the headstone. I have been thinking a lot about Thomas lately. Carolyn gave me his medical school ring. I wear it sometimes, on a chain around my neck, close to my heart like you wore that locket. It helps me feel connected to him, to the man who gave me half my DNA, but none of my history. A bird lands nearby, pecking at the grass, unconcerned by my presence. I watch it for a moment before continuing my one-sided conversation. I understand now why you kept his identity secret for so long. You were protecting both of us, protecting the life you built despite impossible circumstances. Robert would have used that information to hurt me, to make me feel illegitimate, unwanted. You spared me that pain as long as you could. The wind picks up, rustling leaves in nearby trees. I imagine it is my mother's presence, her way of acknowledging my words. I forgive you, I say aloud, though I am not sure she needs my forgiveness, for the secrets, for the years of enduring Robert, for every choice you made that put my welfare above your happiness. I forgive you, and I thank you, and I promise to live a life worthy of your sacrifices. I stand brushing grass from my jeans, placing one hand on the cool marble of her headstone. I love you, Mom. Thank you for being brave enough to want me, smart enough to protect me, and strong enough to defeat Robert even from your grave. You gave me everything, and I will never forget that. As I walk back to my car, I feel lighter than I have in years. The secrets are out, the lies exposed, the manipulations defeated. Robert lost. My mother won. And I inherited not just her estate, but her strength, her strategic mind, her capacity for fierce, protective love. That love continues in the relationships I build with both sides of my family, in the work I do, honoring my mother's passion for literacy, in the cautious hope I allow myself for a future with Marcus. My mother's legacy is not just money or property, but the example she set. That love requires sacrifice. That protecting those we cherish sometimes means making difficult choices. That strategic planning and emotional devotion are not contradictory, but complementary. I drive back to Richmond as the sun sets, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone rings as I pull into my parking space. Marcus, asking if I want to grab dinner. I agree, grateful for the distraction, for the company, for someone who knows my history and chooses me anyway. At dinner, I tell him about my visit to the cemetery, about the ongoing process of integrating my mother's choices into my understanding of love and family. She sounds like she was one hell of a woman, Marcus says, raising his wine glass, to Patricia Harrison, who loved her daughter enough to wage war from beyond the grave. I laugh, touching my glass to his, to my mother, who taught me that love is not passive or easy, but active and fierce and worth fighting for. We drink to that truth, to the memory of a woman who refused to let death stop her from protecting her child. My mother's fury at the funeral, delivered via recording, was her final act of love. She anticipated Robert's cruelty and preempted it with devastating precision. She won, and in winning, she gave me freedom. I am Emily Harrison, daughter of Patricia Harrison and Thomas Brennan. I am the product of a brief affair and a fierce love, raised in a cold marriage but protected by strategic planning. My life began with secrets and ended with revelations, but through it all, One truth remained constant. I was wanted, chosen, loved beyond measure. That is my mother's legacy, more valuable than any estate, more lasting than any property. She taught me that family is not just biology but choice, that love sometimes requires secrecy, and that protecting those we cherish might mean making choices others will not understand. I carry her lessons forward, building a life she would be proud of, honoring her memory not through grief but through living fully, loving deeply, and never taking for granted the sacrifices she made so I could exist. My mother's funeral may have turned into a nightmare, but it also became her final victory, her last gift to the daughter she loved more than life itself. And I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that love.